Hi, my name is Faith. My sister sent me a text that said, "You're not family anymore. Don't come back." It came just hours after I found out she drained my account, $230,000 gone, and changed the locks on the only home I had left. 2 days later, while I was sleeping in a motel, she posted a photo of my parents, all smiles, having dinner, with my money, wearing a dress I designed. In the house I was locked out of. They knew what they were doing. Weeks before I even left, they planned it. But what they didn't know was that Clara, my grandmother, left me something they couldn't steal. And now I wonder, how far will your own family go when they decide you don't belong? I was still wearing the blazer I'd borrowed for the interview, still had my resume folded neatly in my bag. It was mid-October in Boulder, and the air had that crispness that usually made me want to walk slower, breathe deeper. But that afternoon, the chill bit harder. I had just pulled into the driveway of what used to be my safe place, our family home, when my phone buzzed. One notification, just one, from Vera. "You're not family anymore. Don't come back." I didn't move. For a second, I thought it was a mistake, some cruel meme or bot message, but it was her number, my sister's, and she meant it. My thumb hovered over the screen, rereading it again and again. There was no typo, no miscommunication, just those 10 words, cold, final, unforgiving. I looked at the house, the white shutters Mom insisted on keeping freshly painted, the porch swing Dad never sat in, the hydrangeas I planted one summer when I thought I still belonged. It all looked the same, and yet I felt like a stranger on my own lawn. My heart was already twisting when the second notification came in. It was from the bank, the joint account. The one Vera and I set up years ago to manage shared expenses when I was freelancing and struggling. I hadn't touched that account in months. I logged in without thinking. Balance, $0. Available funds, $0. Gone. $230,000. My savings. Every check from freelance gigs, every night I worked late, every client I'd bent over backwards for, wiped out. My breath caught somewhere between a gasp and a choke. I opened the transaction history, transfers, renovations, retail, a spa weekend in Vail, a wellness retreat that cost more than I'd made in 6 months, all recent, all traced back to Vera. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. My hands were trembling, but I managed to toss the phone onto the passenger seat and just sat there, staring at the house like it might somehow offer an explanation. 6 months ago, I came home with my head down. The boutique I worked for had closed with no warning. I'd tried to stay afloat, designing from home, shipping pieces on my own dime, but the bills piled up faster than the orders. I was exhausted, and I just needed a place to land for a little while. I asked Mom and Dad if I could stay. Vera was already living there. Between condos, she said, but everyone knew she liked being the queen of the house. "You can stay in your old room," Mom had said, not unkindly, but not warmly either. "Just for a bit. Rent's expected, of course." I agreed. Of course I did. I cleaned. I paid what I could. I tried to stay out of the way. Vera made it clear. I was a guest, not family. Not anymore. "You're 33, Faith," she'd say, shaking her head when she passed my room. "This isn't a halfway house." I never answered back. I figured it was better to keep the peace, stay quiet, focus on getting back on my feet. But apparently, even my silence was too loud for them. And now this. I pressed the key into the ignition but didn't turn it. I just sat there. I couldn't cry. I couldn't think. I was stuck in some space between numbness and rage, like my body didn't know which one to give in to first. Every late-night sketch, every trip to the post office, every dress I stitched by hand, it was all in that account. It was the only thing that had kept me from feeling like a complete failure. And she took it, without asking, without warning. I stepped out of the car and walked to the front door, half hoping this was some horrible misunderstanding. Maybe she was bluffing. Maybe there was more to the text. Maybe... The lock didn't budge. I tried again. Still nothing. I stepped back and stared at the handle. She'd changed the locks. I knocked. Nothing. I rang the bell. Still nothing. I walked around to the side door. Locked. The back door? Same. And then I realized This wasn't just some angry message sent in the heat of the moment. This was planned, deliberate, a severance, a rejection, a complete removal. I walked slowly back to my car. I didn't have a plan, no clear place to go. I drove aimlessly through the streets of Boulder, past coffee shops I used to work from, past the park where I walked when the stress got too heavy. The sun was dipping behind the mountains, and the city took on that dusky glow that usually made me feel at ease. Not tonight. After about an hour, I pulled into the parking lot of a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. I didn't check the reviews. I didn't care. I just needed a room with a lock and 4 walls. The room smelled faintly of bleach and old smoke. The curtains didn't close all the way. The mattress dipped in the middle. But it was mine, for the night. I dropped my bag and fell into the chair by the window. My phone buzzed. I grabbed it like a reflex, hoping, stupidly, that maybe someone had texted to apologize, to explain. It was Instagram. I opened the app, not thinking, just trying to distract myself. There it was. The photo. Vera, Mom, Dad, sitting at the dining table, wine glasses raised, Chinese takeout containers open like they were feasting on peace. The caption read, "Family night, nothing better." I stared at it for a long time. Mom was smiling. Dad, too. Vera was wearing the emerald green wrap dress I designed 6 months ago, back when she still pretended to support my work. They didn't just lock me out. They were celebrating, without me. And in that moment, I knew. They didn't just kick me out, they erased me. The motel ceiling had water stains shaped like ghosts. I laid there all night, staring at them like they held some kind of answer. I hadn't slept, not really. Just drifted in and out, my mind stuck in loops, rewriting what had already happened as if it might suddenly end differently. My body ached from the motel mattress, but it wasn't the springs or the stiffness. It was the ache of being unwanted. Not just by anyone, by your own blood. I hadn't even bothered changing out of yesterday's clothes. The same dress shirt from my interview was wrinkled beyond hope, and my hair felt like it had been through a wind tunnel. I reached for my phone, only to realize it had less than 5% battery left. My charger was still at the house, right where I left it. Dragging myself upright, I stepped into my shoes and went to the front desk. The man behind the counter, maybe early 60s, didn't look up from his newspaper until I cleared my throat. I asked if I could borrow a phone charger. He handed me a universal one from a drawer without a word. I thanked him and sat on a worn vinyl chair near the front window, plugging it into the nearest outlet. While the phone powered up, I watched a couple leave the motel. They looked tired, but at least they had each other. All I had was my purse, a dead phone, and the echo of a text message that still hadn't left my chest. "You're not family anymore." I wanted to scream, but instead, I sat still, because that's what I'd been taught to do. Be still. Don't make a scene. Don't embarrass them. When the battery hit 20%, I stood up and walked back to my room. I grabbed my bag, keys, and left. There was only one thing I needed to know now. I had to try. One last time. I drove slowly back toward the house. It was early, just after 7:30 a.m., and the sun was creeping up behind the rooftops, casting long shadows across the street. The air felt colder today, sharper. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel as the house came into view. From the outside, it looked like nothing had changed. Same hedges Vera made me trim last spring. Same porch swing Dad never sat on. Same front door with the navy paint I helped Mom pick out years ago. I parked 2 houses down, not because I had to, but because I couldn't bring myself to pull into the driveway. My legs were shaky as I walked up the path. I paused at the door, then slipped my key into the lock. It didn't turn. Not stuck. Not stiff. Just wrong. I tried again. Still nothing. I stepped back and looked at it. This wasn't a mistake. The locks had been changed. The realization didn't hit all at once. It crept in, like cold seeping through a broken window. I moved to the side entrance. Nothing. Then the back door. Same thing. I checked the garage keypad. Code denied. I was locked out of my childhood home. On purpose. Someone had looked me in the eye the day before, smiled like everything was normal, and then made sure I'd never get back in. They didn't just want me gone, they wanted me erased. My chest tightened as I walked back to the front. I stood on the porch, staring at the door like it might open itself. Then I knocked. Once, twice. I rang the bell. No sound. No footsteps inside. No creak of a hallway floorboard. But I knew someone was home. The curtains shifted upstairs. A light flickered in the kitchen. They knew I was out here, and they didn't care. I pulled out my phone, called Vera, voicemail. I tried Mom, straight to voicemail. Dad? Nothing. I stood there, phone still in my hand, trying to remember if I had ever truly belonged in that house. It hit me harder than anything else. Maybe I never had. I sat down on the porch step, knees up to my chest. Cars passed by and a jogger nodded at me as if I was just someone enjoying the morning air. I wasn't crying. Not yet. I wasn't sure I even could anymore. Out of habit, I opened Instagram. The first story at the top, Vera. I should have known better, but I clicked anyway. She had posted a photo, maybe taken just minutes ago. The kitchen table was filled with breakfast items from the upscale Italian cafe downtown. Croissants, cappuccinos, fruit platters arranged like art. The caption read, "Celebrating new beginnings, family over everything." My stomach twisted. My eyes locked on the photo. Mom was there, smiling. Dad, too, sipping espresso like he didn't just cut his daughter off. Vera looked radiant in my charcoal gray cardigan, the one I thought I lost last week. There it was. They were celebrating with my money, and I was sitting on the porch, watching them through a phone screen like some stranger. I wanted to barge in. I wanted to scream, to make them see what they were doing, but I knew that would only give them more power. They'd say I was unstable, emotional. That's always been their favorite label for me when I pushed back. Instead, I opened a text message to Vera. "This is theft. This is illegal. You'll regret this." I typed it, my fingers shaking, eyes burning. But I didn't hit send. I stared at the words for a while. Then I backspaced. Every single letter. What would be the point? She already knew. She didn't care. I slipped the phone into my coat pocket, stood up, and stepped off the porch. My legs felt like they were filled with concrete, but I kept walking, back to my car, back to the motel, back to nowhere. As I sat behind the wheel again, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached, I whispered to no one, "I need help. I need to fight back, but I have nothing left." After whispering those words to myself, "Okay, Grandma, let's open that door," I sat in the car for a while longer. The motel's neon sign blinked in the reflection of my windshield, casting a pale blue light across the dashboard. I couldn't go back inside yet. That room felt like a tomb. I needed air, and more than that, I needed clarity. The gas station next to the motel was still open, so I walked over, bought a bottle of water and a packet of almonds, my first food in almost 24 hours. I ate them slowly on a bench near the dumpster, surrounded by the hum of traffic and the distant sound of someone arguing on their phone in the parking lot. It was the kind of noise that reminded me I still existed, that I wasn't invisible, not completely. Eventually, I made it back to the motel room. The air was thick with the scent of old carpet and disinfectant. I didn't bother changing clothes. I just collapsed onto the bed and stared at the ceiling. Again. My thoughts weren't just racing, they were ricocheting. I reached for my phone and opened the photo app. Maybe a part of me was hoping to see a version of myself before all this, before betrayal became my closest relative. I scrolled through old images, me at the boutique, standing beside mannequins wearing my designs, me with Grandma Clara, holding a half-finished quilt between us, and then, a recent one, from 3 nights ago. It was dark in the photo, just a blurry image I'd taken on instinct, standing outside the house. But when I zoomed in, you could see it, through the curtain, my dad standing in the kitchen. The light above the sink glowing over his silver hair. He saw me. He stood there, coffee in hand, watching me knock on the door like a beggar. And then he turned off the light and walked away. I hadn't let myself remember it until now, but it was there, that moment, that choice. My dad, my own father, turned away, and he had done that more times than I could count. When Vera screamed at me during Christmas dinner and I ended up eating alone in the car, he said nothing. When Mom laughed at my dream of opening a design studio and said, "Cute, but real women build equity, not Etsy shops." He nodded in agreement. Every time I needed someone to stand up for me, he sat down. And I excused it, for years. He's tired. He's non-confrontational. He loves me, he just doesn't show it the way Mom or Vera do. But it wasn't love. It was cowardice, plain and simple. The realization didn't come with anger. It came with quiet, with a sense of release, like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally exhaled. By mid-morning, I decided I couldn't sit in that motel room any longer. I needed to move, do something, anything that gave me back a sense of control. So I drove across town to the storage unit I had rented after leaving my apartment. It wasn't fancy, just a row of orange roll-up doors behind a chain-link fence, but inside that 10 by 10 space was everything I had left that still belonged to me. Boxes of fabric, sketchbooks, a broken sewing machine, old letters. The remnants of a life I was trying to rebuild. I flipped on the small hanging light and started going through the boxes, one by one. It was the kind of task that kept your hands busy while your mind wandered, and I welcomed it. About 30 minutes in, I found a box labeled Books Grandma Clara's Stuff. Inside, tucked between a copy of the sewing Bible and a faded photo album, was a yellow envelope. The handwriting on it was unmistakable, rounded letters, the F always with a tiny curl at the top. For Faith, if things go wrong. My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten in blue ink. My darling Faith, if you're reading this, it means things didn't go the way I hoped. I always worried they wouldn't. I've seen how Vera looks at you, how your mother dismisses you. It's not fair. It never was. I couldn't stop them while I was alive, but I tried to leave you something after I was gone. A trust account, access to part of the house, legal rights that can't be erased with a change of locks. I've set everything up with Edward Walsh. He's a good man, a lawyer I trusted before I passed. Find him. He knows what to do. You have more rights than they want you to believe. With love, and always, belief in your light. Grandma Clara. I didn't cry. Not right away. I read the letter again. Then again. Then I held it to my chest and just sat on the floor of that storage unit, the smell of dust and cardboard all around me. She knew. She saw it all coming. She knew the people I called family were capable of this. And she didn't just leave me a letter. She left me a lifeline. When I finally stood up, my knees cracked and my back ached, but I felt stronger than I had in weeks. I drove straight to the nearest coffee shop with Wi-Fi and ordered a black coffee, no room for cream. I sat at a corner table, pulled out my phone, and searched for Edward Walsh. His name came up quickly. Estate planning, trusts, downtown Boulder. I clicked the contact form. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then I typed. Hello? My name is Faith Salazar. I believe you were listed as the legal trustee on a document my grandmother Clara Mendez created before her passing. I believe my rights have been violated by members of my family. I would like to meet and discuss what legal options may be available. I reread it 3 times before hitting send. And then, as the wind picked up outside and leaves swirled across the sidewalk, I whispered under my breath, almost smiling through the weight of everything still ahead of me. Okay, Grandma, let's open that door. The woman on the other end of the phone had a polished voice, the kind that sounded like it belonged behind glass doors and mahogany desks. She didn't flinch when I said my name. She didn't ask me to repeat it. Instead, after a brief pause, she simply said, "One moment, please, Ms. Salazar," and placed me on hold. It wasn't just a phone call. It was a step across a threshold, and I felt it. My hand holding the phone was steady, but the rest of me was buzzing. My chest, my jaw, my legs, everything tingled with the weight of the moment. If I was right about what Clara had set up, then my family hadn't just locked me out physically. They'd violated something much bigger. A few bars of classical music played through the phone before the line clicked back in. "Edward Walsh speaking," a male voice said, deep and composed. I inhaled slowly. "Hi, my name is Faith Salazar. I think my family stole everything from me. And I believe my grandmother set up something, some kind of trust. She left me a letter with your name on it." There was a pause, no surprise, no denial, just a quiet breath before he answered, "Yes, Ms. Salazar. I've been expecting this call." That one sentence, it cracked me open in a way I didn't anticipate. After we scheduled a meeting for the following day, I left the cafe, still gripping my phone like it was a lifeline. Back in the motel, I laid Clara's letter out on the bed and read it again, then placed it carefully into a Ziploc bag I'd found in my tote. If they had taken everything else from me, they weren't getting this. By late afternoon, I was walking aimlessly through Boulder with the letter pressed against my chest inside my coat, like armor. The air had cooled, clouds rolling in overhead, but I barely noticed. I just needed to move, to walk off the weight in my bones. At a red light, I stopped and, without really meaning to, dialed my mother. My hands were clammy, my mouth dry, but I hit the button and held the phone to my ear, each ring heavier than the last. Voicemail. I don't know why I expected anything else, but just as I started to lower the phone, a message buzzed through. From Mom. "You made your choices, Faith. Don't ruin your sister's life just because yours didn't work out." There it was. Clean. Surgical. A gut punch. Not "I'm sorry." Not "let's talk." Just a quiet verdict. I was the problem, not the theft, not the betrayal. Me. I stood there on the sidewalk, staring at the screen until it went dim. Then I put the phone in my pocket and started walking again. Not fast, not angry, just deliberate. Every step was one more inch away from them. About an hour later, I ended up near my old neighborhood. I wasn't planning to go back there, not today, but something tugged at me. Maybe I just wanted to see it with new eyes, now that I had a letter in my coat and a name on a legal document. I pulled into the gas station at the corner of the block. I grabbed a soda from the cooler and stood in line behind two teenagers arguing about concert tickets. My mind was elsewhere, drifting, until I heard a familiar voice behind me. Well, now there's a face I haven't seen in a while. I turned and found myself face to face with Mrs. Hargrove, our old neighbor. She was holding a bag of pretzels and a lottery ticket, wearing the same oversized fleece she always wore when walking her dog. "Mrs. Hargrove," I said, managing a smile. She reached out and gave me a gentle hug. "You okay, honey? You look tired." "I'm figuring some things out," I said, not trusting myself to say more. She tilted her head, concern etched into every wrinkle. "I was wondering what happened. One day you were there, and the next, nothing." I said nothing. She stepped closer, lowered her voice. "You know, Vera had the locksmith over the week before, told me she needed to change everything for security reasons. I thought it was strange, but—" Her voice trailed off. My breath caught. A week before the fight, before I left to cool down. It wasn't an impulsive act. It was orchestrated. They knew they were going to shut me out, before I even stepped out the door. "They planned it," I said, mostly to myself. Mrs. Hargrove nodded slowly. "I thought it was odd. I'm sorry, Faith. I should have said something sooner." I shook my head. "No. Thank you for telling me." We parted ways in the parking lot. She gave me another squeeze on the arm and walked off toward her little blue sedan. I sat in my car for a long while, her words echoing louder than the engine. They planned it. That night, back at the motel, I spread out every paper I had. Clara's letter, my old bank statements, screenshots of text messages, photos of the house. I printed everything I could from my email and social media. I wanted a paper trail so thick it couldn't be ignored. I wasn't moving out of emotion anymore. This wasn't about yelling or crying. It was about facts. They changed the locks before I ever left. They drained my savings. They used my designs for their public image. And now, with Mom's message, they had made it clear they weren't sorry. They were proud of it. I opened my voice recorder, took a breath, and hit record. "Vera," I said quietly, "I know what you did, and I'm not afraid of you anymore. You crossed every line there was. This isn't about sibling rivalry or petty jealousy. This is theft. This is cruelty. This is erasure. And I'm done being quiet. I paused. I'll see you in the light. I saved the recording and sent it to myself. It was 11:32 p.m. when I finally pulled out Clara's letter again and dialed the number she had written down for Edward Walsh. It rang once. Then a calm voice answered. Walsh Foster Law Group. How can we help you? I closed my eyes, just for a second, then opened them and said, clearly, My name is Faith Salazar. I think my family stole everything from me. The line had gone quiet after I said those words, like even the air around me was holding its breath. Edward Walsh didn't ask for clarification, didn't hesitate. He simply said, Let's meet tomorrow morning. Bring everything you have. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't toss or turn either. I just sat at the small motel desk with my laptop open, Clara's letter beside me, and a notebook half filled with dates, names, bank references, and memories I no longer wanted to suppress. I wasn't grieving anymore. I wasn't confused. I was building a case. At 9 a.m., sharp, I stepped into Walsh Foster's office. It sat on the 10th floor of a downtown building lined with windows that looked out over the foothills. The receptionist, a woman with icy white hair and tortoiseshell glasses, gave me a small nod and buzzed Edward. He greeted me with a calmness that grounded me. His voice was gentle but firm, and when he said, I've known your grandmother for over 20 years, I believed him. For the next hour, we went through every document I brought. I handed over my bank statements, digital screenshots, even old voicemails I had saved without knowing why. He didn't blink when I showed him the letter Clara had written me. Instead, he placed it in a folder marked Primary Documents and nodded. We'll start here, he said, tapping the folder. When I left the building, I felt different, not hopeful. Hope still felt like a luxury, but steadier, like I wasn't alone in a tunnel anymore. Back at the motel, I set up shop again. Laptop open, files spread out. I started combing through my email archives. I hadn't expected anything major, just confirmation receipts, order forms. But buried in my inbox, among old newsletters and promotion codes, was a new email with a subject line that made my heart stop. Thank you, Vera. It was from a boutique design brand I had admired for years. My hands moved before my brain could catch up. I opened it. Hi, Vera. We're thrilled with the collection you submitted last week. Your sketches are fresh, feminine, and elegant, exactly the aesthetic our team is drawn to this season. We'd love to schedule a Zoom call with you early next week to talk next steps. There were attachments. JPEGs. I clicked them. Each one loaded slowly on the motel Wi-Fi, but when they appeared, I didn't need to look twice. They were mine. My signature wrap silhouettes, my color-blocked shift dresses, even the embroidered cuff detail I had designed as a nod to Clara's old sewing patterns. She didn't just take my money. She stole my art. I sat back in the chair, a numbness climbing up my arms. Not because I was shocked. At this point, I had stopped giving Vera the benefit of any doubt. But because this was a different kind of betrayal. This was identity theft of the soul. I didn't cry. Instead, I took a screenshot of the email, the sender's info, the attachments. I labeled everything, filed it all. Then I opened my spam folder. I hadn't checked it in months. Most of it was garbage, expired coupons, scam alerts, political junk. But one thread caught my eye. A forwarded bank alert. Dated nearly 3 months ago. It warned of a withdrawal, $60,000, from the trust account. But I never saw it. I opened the full message, clicked through the metadata, and there it was. The email had been marked as read, not by me. The IP address matched the Castell House Wi-Fi. She had intercepted it, read it, deleted the notification before I could react. They'd gotten away with this because they'd played the long game, quiet manipulation, silent clicks, clean erasures. I sat in front of that laptop until the sun went down. Then I stood up, walked to the bathroom mirror, and looked at myself. You're not crazy, I whispered. You're not overreacting. They did this. Later that night, after scanning all my files and organizing my folders, I opened a blank email. To vera.castell@hayesrealty.com. CC edward.walsh@walshfoster.com. Subject, formal notice. Vera, I know what you did. The next time you see my designs, it'll be in court, with my name on them. Faith. I read it over once, then twice. Then I hit send. I didn't care what she thought. I didn't care if she panicked or laughed or told Mom I was trying to cause drama. This wasn't about their narrative anymore. It was about the truth. 2 hours later, while I was brushing my teeth and trying to calm my nerves enough to sleep, my phone rang. It was Edward. Faith, he said. I've reviewed your trust file. Your grandmother was meticulous. Your name is on the deed. Vera had no legal authority to change the locks or remove access to the funds. She's in serious breach. I sat down on the bed. So you're saying what she did, changing the locks, draining the account, submitting my work, that was all illegal? Yes, he replied without hesitation. And provable. I didn't respond right away. I let the word settle. Provable, not assumed, not suspected, not emotional. Provable. I stood up, walked back to the laptop, opened the folder labeled Clara, and clicked the document named Everything They Took. And I said, clear and calm, then let's show her what silence sounds like when it speaks in court. I stayed awake well into the night, the glow of my laptop casting pale light across the room. Files were open everywhere, PDFs, scanned bank statements, images of my designs, the email from the boutique that mistook Vera for me. It was all organized now, collated into folders marked by date and category. I didn't feel rage anymore, not even grief, just a sharp-edged clarity that steadied me. By morning, I was dressed in something clean but simple, gray slacks, a fitted top, my hair in a low bun. Not to impress, not to appear polished, it was armor, quiet, unassuming, but undeniably mine. Edward Walsh's office was in a modest building downtown, not far from the county courthouse. No glass skyscraper, no flashy logo. Just a brass plaque outside the door that read Walsh Foster LLP. The receptionist greeted me with that professional warmth older secretaries carry. Discreet, efficient, no small talk. Edward met me at the door of his office and offered a firm handshake. He looked exactly like someone you'd trust with your will. Mid-60s, tidy salt and pepper beard, hands that never fidget. Faith, he said, let's get to it. He had already prepared a large binder with the Clara Mendez Trust printed across the front in bold font. My grandmother's name, my real family. Inside that binder was everything she had arranged before she passed. Edward walked me through the pages slowly, explaining as he went. This, he said, pointing to a signature near the bottom of the second page, confirms that you are co-beneficiary of the Mendez family home, equal standing with your mother and sister, which means changing the locks without your consent was a breach. He turned a few more pages. And here, this is the clause related to the Creative Fund. Your grandmother established a separate account specifically for your use in fashion design. The original amount was $250,000. Current balance. He paused, not for dramatic effect, but as if disappointed in the numbers. Just under 130. I blinked. That means 120,000 has been withdrawn over the past 4 years, mostly within the last 18 months. The recipients, renovation contractors, a boutique PR agency, and 2 travel agents. I didn't flinch, not because I wasn't furious, but because I had already known. This just confirmed it. They used my money, I said, not as a question. Edward nodded once. They did, without disclosure, without your consent, and that constitutes misappropriation of funds. I inhaled deeply and looked out the window behind him. The sun was inching higher above the buildings, warming the snow-dusted rooftops. I thought of Clara, how she always made sun tea in glass jars on the porch. She believed in letting things steep. I want to press charges, I said. He lifted his head. That's one option. You could also begin with a formal mediation request. Your grandmother included an arbitration clause, likely to avoid public legal battles within the family, but we can push for restitution, immediate cessation of access to the fund, and I want them to look me in the eye, I interrupted, gently but firmly. I want them to sit across from me and try to explain what they did. He nodded again. Then we'll set the meeting. He had his assistant, Mira, draft a formal invitation to Vera Castell and Evelyn Salazar for a mediation session to be held within the week. The language was careful but direct: breach of trust, misuse of funds, removal of co-beneficiary without cause, legal but personal. Later that evening, I received a call from Lyndon. His voice was steady, but I could hear the buzz of something: excitement, maybe pride. "You did it," he said. "You pulled the trigger." "I didn't pull anything," I said, sitting on the edge of the motel bed with my phone pressed to my ear. "I just finally decided I don't owe them my silence." There was a pause, then he said, "This is your moment, Faith. You're not reacting anymore. You're leading." I closed my eyes. The words settled somewhere deep. "They wanted me to be quiet," I murmured. "Let's see how they handle my voice." After we hung up, I made a cup of peppermint tea in the microwave and sat by the small window. The motel parking lot was half empty. The room next to mine had its curtains drawn open, revealing a man pacing while holding a baby. Life kept moving around me, even in this liminal space. For the first time in weeks, I opened my sketchpad. The pages were untouched since long before the locks changed. I stared at the blank sheet for several minutes, pencil resting in my hand. Then slowly I began to draw. Not clothes, not dresses or collections, just an image, a bird, a phoenix, its wings bound by chains at the base, but breaking free mid-flight. I didn't shade it in. I didn't add any color, just the outlines, raw and unpolished, but real. The more I drew, the more I felt like myself again. Not the girl they called dramatic, unstable, ungrateful, but the woman Clara saw all along. The one who wasn't afraid to burn bridges if that's what it took to build her own road. By the time the clock neared midnight, I closed the sketchpad gently and placed it on the nightstand. Then I stood, stretched my arms overhead, and whispered to the empty room. Tomorrow, I stopped being the story they wrote for me. By sunrise, I had barely slept, but I didn't feel tired. There was something about knowing you're finally about to be heard that gives you just enough adrenaline to push through the exhaustion. I packed my documents in a clean leather folder I hadn't used since my last job interview. My sketchpad, now with that phoenix breaking its chains, went with me too. I got dressed slowly. A gray wrap dress I'd sewn 2 winters ago, back when I still believed Vera might one day be proud of me. It had sharp lines, soft fabric, and when I zipped it up, I didn't feel like someone trying to make a statement. I felt like myself. Quiet strength was all I needed to carry into that room. At 8:45 a.m., I walked into Walsh Foster's building, 10th floor. Same receptionist. Same view of the mountains stretching beyond downtown Boulder. Mira, Edward's assistant, ushered me into a glass-walled conference room overlooking Pearl Street. The table was long, the kind you see in movies where someone always slams their hand down and shouts, "I'll see you in court!" I didn't plan on shouting. I sat on the side closest to the window. Edward entered a few minutes later, calm and precise as always. He nodded to me, then reviewed a few papers without speaking. At exactly 9:00, they walked in. Vera led the way, in heels too high for her comfort and a blazer I recognized from my old closet. She didn't look at me, not once. Evelyn followed behind her, clutching her purse like a shield. Her lips were pressed into a tight line, and her eyes darted between me and the view behind me, as if she couldn't decide which one she disliked more. Dad didn't come. I hadn't expected him to. Edward stood. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice clear and firm. "We're here to mediate a serious matter involving the Clara Mendez Trust, including misappropriation of funds, unauthorized exclusion of a co-beneficiary, and intellectual property theft." Vera rolled her eyes. Evelyn sighed audibly. I stayed silent. Edward continued. "Let's start with the financials. Faith Salazar, listed co-beneficiary of the trust, was denied access to her share of the family home. Funds explicitly allocated for her career development in fashion were redirected without consent toward personal purchases and renovations. He opened the binder and slid copies across the table. Highlighted statements, transfer records, receipts from the Aspen Kitchen contractor, the luxury travel agency. Everything. Evelyn's mouth opened slightly. She reached for her reading glasses, skimming the pages too quickly to actually read them. Vera didn't blink. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. This is ridiculous. The money was part of the family's shared trust. We made upgrades that benefited everyone. Edward didn't flinch. The terms of the trust were clear. Each allocation had specific stipulations. Faith's fund was not to be touched without her written approval. I mean, come on, Vera said, her voice a touch louder. She wasn't using it. She's been floating between failed ventures for years. I took initiative. That's what Mom always said to do. Take initiative. Evelyn, finally looking at me, murmured, "We thought you'd be grateful. At least the house looks good now." There it was, the final twist of the knife. They thought if they dressed it up enough, they could justify cutting me out of it. Edward leaned slightly forward. Let's move on. I opened my laptop and turned it toward them. One by one, I clicked through slides, photographs of my original sketches, timestamps from my design software, receipts for fabric I'd purchased, handwritten notes. Then I brought up Vera's boutique website. A section called Legacy Sisters. Her new fashion line. The first image, one of my designs, down to the cuff. I clicked the next slide, another match, then another. Then I said quietly, "That boutique you emailed, the one who thanked you for the submission? They're mine. Every piece, every line. That's my work. You didn't just steal my money, you stole my name." Vera's face flushed. For the first time that morning, she looked rattled. "That's not true," she spat. You're not even in the industry anymore." Edward calmly placed a printed copy of the email from the boutique on the table. Evelyn looked down, her mouth trembling just slightly. I kept going. "You said I was a failure. You said I didn't contribute. But the only reason you could pitch that line was because you wore me like a mask." Silence. Vera shifted in her seat. Then she said it. "You've always been jealous of me." The words didn't sting. Not anymore. I leaned in, met her eyes, and said evenly, "You've always needed me to stay small so you could feel big." Edward slid a folder across the table. "This is our proposed settlement," he said. "Full restitution of all misused funds, formal public acknowledgement of creative ownership, and the reinstatement of co-beneficiary status with full property access." Vera laughed once. A short, sharp sound. "You really think I'm signing this?" Evelyn looked at the folder, then at me. She looked tired, older than I remembered. "Maybe we should talk it through," she started. Vera cut her off. "Absolutely not." Edward folded his hands. "Then legal proceedings will begin Monday. You'll be notified." I stood, picked up my folder, smoothed my dress, and I looked them both in the eye. "Then I'll see you in court," I said. "But this time, I'm the one with the receipts." By Monday morning, the settlement meeting was already old news in my mind. What came next was war, and I wasn't fighting with emotion anymore. This time, I had paperwork, names, numbers, screenshots, witnesses. I had everything I needed to take back what was stolen, not just from my accounts, but from my name, my identity, my worth. That morning, I sat across from Edward and Lyndon at a quiet conference table, surrounded by legal folders and strong black coffee. No small talk, no checking if I was okay. Just business, exactly how I wanted it. Edward slid a slim stack of printed papers across the table. "This is your formal complaint. It covers breach of trust, financial misappropriation, property exclusion, and intellectual property theft." I read it twice, slowly. Every word hit like a match against flint. Lyndon chimed in gently. "Once this is filed, there's no walking it back. Are you ready for that?" I looked up. I was ready the moment they closed the door on me. I signed. Later that day, Edward submitted the complaint to the Boulder County Court. Within 48 hours, Vera and Evelyn received their first official notice. Salazar Vossi, Castell et al. A mediation had failed. Legal action was moving forward. By Thursday, the fallout had already started. I didn't have to chase it. It came to me. My phone lit up with a message from an old friend of Vera's, someone I hadn't spoken to since college. "Hey, Faith, just saw the Business Journal. Wow. Call me if you need anything. I didn't answer, but I did open the link she sent. Castell Real Estate CEO under investigation for alleged trust fund misuse. The article was short, clinical. It named Clara Mendez as the original grantor. It listed the trust value, the allegations of unauthorized spending, and my name, once invisible, was now in bold print. Faith Salazar, co-beneficiary of the Mendez Trust, has filed suit against Castell Real Estate CEO Vera Castell and Evelyn Salazar for allegedly excluding her from both familial and legal access to the estate. By Friday, Vera was removed from the board of the company. She hadn't been fired yet, but her access was restricted, and her title was suspended pending internal review. No matter how they dressed it up, it was a fall from grace, and it was just beginning. The house, the one I grew up in, the one they locked me out of, was next. A formal notice was served by Walsh Foster on Monday afternoon. The deed had been reviewed and cross-referenced with the trust. My name was there. Vera and Evelyn had bypassed that fact illegally. And now, that had consequences. Vera had 30 days to vacate the property. Evelyn didn't argue. She quietly began moving her things out that same week. I heard from a neighbor she was staying with a cousin in Denver who owed her a favor. The same cousin who hadn't attended Christmas dinner in 5 years. I never saw Dad during any of this. No call, no message, nothing. But that didn't surprise me anymore. What did surprise me were the messages that trickled in from people I never thought would speak up. Former clients of Castell Real Estate who had once ignored me at parties. Boutique owners who had turned down my work because it didn't fit their market. Faith, I had no idea. You were always so talented. I remember Clara talking about your designs. She was proud. Even a small Boulder lifestyle magazine reached out. We'd love to tell your side of the story, the editor said. Let you speak for yourself. I didn't answer right away. I let it sit. Because this wasn't just a scandal. It was my life. A week later, I found myself driving past the house, not because I missed it, but because it felt like a marker. Like a story I'd almost let them finish without me. And that's when I saw her, Vera, standing on the lawn with a single box in her arms. The porch light was on, even though it was still bright outside, as if someone had forgotten to flip the switch in all the chaos. She was wearing a blazer that didn't quite fit, something she must have grabbed in a rush. Her expression wasn't angry or indignant like I expected. It was tired. She saw me as I pulled over. I hadn't meant to stop, but something in her stare made me cut the engine. I stepped out, slowly, not saying a word. She walked toward the gate, gripping the box against her chest like it was her last possession. When she reached me, she didn't say hello. Instead, she hissed, "You ruined me." I didn't flinch. I didn't apologize. I didn't offer comfort. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "No, you did that all by yourself." She blinked. But there was no retort. No last insult. Just silence. She turned and walked to her car, placed the box in the back seat, and drove away. I stood there for a while longer, not moving, not thinking, just breathing. Because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was surviving their story. I was writing my own. She didn't look back, not once. As Vera drove off with the last of her things, there was no tearful goodbye, no begging for reconciliation, no final plea for understanding. Just silence. Fitting, really. The same silence they used against me for years, now wrapped around her like a mirror. I stood at the gate for a few moments after she disappeared down the street. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't need to see the house again. Not like that. Spring came slowly that year, almost as if the ground was cautious, like it wasn't sure if it was safe to thaw yet. But eventually, the snow gave way to soft green buds on the trees, and Boulder's sidewalks started to fill with bikers, artists, and families once more. Life resumed its natural rhythm, and I finally felt like I could breathe in it. I had moved into a modest third-floor apartment with wide windows that overlooked a little garden patch maintained by the building's elderly tenants. My sewing machine sat in the corner by the light, and my sketches lined the opposite wall, no longer hidden in a storage unit, but framed and respected. I named my brand Clara Me. It was a small label, deliberate, thoughtful, rooted in heritage. I released a soft launch through a boutique on Pearl Street and a basic website. Nothing flashy, but the response was warmer than I expected. Messages from women saying they felt seen, that the lines spoke to their shape, their stories. It wasn't about fashion anymore, it was about reclaiming space, like I had. One Thursday morning, as I was hand-finishing a collar on a custom blouse, there was a knock at my door. I wiped my hands on a clean rag and opened it. Lyndon stood there holding 2 coffees and a bakery bag. "Peace offering," he said, "and I figured if you're going to run a brand named after your grandmother, you need caffeine to survive." I let out a breath of a laugh and stepped aside to let him in. He set everything down on the counter, then pulled out a manila folder. "It's done," he said. I didn't need to ask what he meant. I knew. The court closed the case. Vera's officially off the business registry. Evelyn never responded to the mediation follow-ups. As of today, it's all yours. Clean. I nodded, letting the words sink in. No ceremony, no victory parade, just closure, served in a manila envelope and a lukewarm latte. Later that evening, after Lyndon left, I opened an email draft that had been sitting in my inbox for weeks. It was addressed to my father. "You didn't say anything when they locked me out. I won't ask you why, but I'll never forget it." I read it over again. There was nothing cruel in it, nothing angry, just the truth. Then I hit delete, not because I forgave him, but because he no longer got to hold space in the new chapter of my life. 2 weeks later, I bought the house back. It wasn't difficult. The trust owned a majority stake, and with Vera and Evelyn out of the picture, I had the right to claim it. But I didn't buy it to move in. I didn't even visit the inside. I didn't need to. That house had already taken enough from me. Instead, I reached out to a local nonprofit that helped women rebuild their lives after domestic abuse and homelessness. I offered the house, furnished, maintained, safe. They cried when I signed it over. I didn't. Because the truth was, I wasn't giving them the house. I was returning it to someone like me. Someone who had been told she didn't belong, who had been pushed out of rooms built on her back. It was only right. That spring, one of the women from the shelter came into my studio. Her name was Angelica. She was 23, quiet, with nervous hands that kept tugging at the hem of her jacket. "I have a job interview," she said, eyes cast low. I don't have anything to wear that doesn't remind me of before." I nodded. "I think I've got just the thing." I pulled out a simple, soft blazer, something I had designed in my first capsule release. I measured her shoulders, then took it in just slightly at the waist. I paired it with a navy shell top and a matching skirt, clean, strong, unafraid. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she didn't say a word, but she stood taller. As she turned to leave, she paused and asked, "Clara, was she your mom?" I smiled. "She was better. She was my grandmother." That night, I sat beside the sewing machine Clara once used. Its wood was nicked and worn, its pedal a little sticky, but it worked, still carried the rhythm of her hands, her breath. On the wall above it, I'd hung a sketch of the phoenix, the one I drew the night before the mediation, chains broken, wings spread, no name on it, just a date. It reminded me that I didn't win because I proved them wrong. I won because I stopped needing to. I looked around my apartment, the shelves filled with bolts of fabric, books on pattern making, jars of buttons and thread. Then I whispered to myself, not for the first time, but maybe for the last. I thought I lost everything when they changed the locks. But all I lost was who they wanted me to be. What I gained was who I actually am. Some doors close for a reason, and sometimes you don't need to open them again, because you're already home. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who cause the deepest wounds. But this story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about reclaiming your voice, your power, and your peace. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from family to protect yourself? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real, emotional family stories that stay with you long after the video ends.